Hello, everyone. Welcome. Very excited to see everyone coming into the room. Hopefully, you're all having a wonderful Friday. It's beautiful and sunny here in Baltimore, but quite chilly. So I am pleased to welcome all of you and especially our special guest, Dr. Alexandra Soa, to today's presentation. I'm Jamie Seward, Associate Director of Affinity Engagement Programs with the Office of Alumni Relations, and I am so excited for today's presentation. I'm personally interested, and I can't wait to hear everything Dr. Soa has to say. She is a board-certified physician of internal medicine, specializing in preventative health, nutrition, and obesity medicine. She is the founder of So Well Health, a company driven by the mission to help people lose weight, gain health, and prevent disease through personalized, evidence-based, whole person care. So Well Health's foundational product, the Weight Biology Kit, is the first at-home lab kit to test for insulin resistance and other metabolic factors that make up your weight biology. So, and I think you can see those boxes right behind Dr. Soa. And just so you all know, we are going to be giving these boxes as prizes to the winners of our Hopkins Fitness Challenge. So I'll send you a little bit about that, some information about that in the follow-up email. So if you win the challenge, you're going to get one of her boxes, and that's very exciting. So before I turn the program over to her, I want to encourage all of you to ask your questions in the Zoom Q&A located at the bottom of your screen, not in the chat. I don't want to lose your questions, so please put them in the Q&A. So without further ado, I am pleased to introduce you to Dr. Soa.
I am so excited to be here. Okay, give me a second as I share my screen. I hope I do it right. These are brave. We've been doing this for a year, so one would think that I'd be a pro at this. Now, Jamie, please tell me that, can someone give me some sort of affirmation that you guys can see the screen before I start?
It looks perfect.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Okay. So, like I said, I really should be a pro at this point, but I don't think I've done a PowerPoint shared yet. So I'm so thrilled to be here. As Jamie said, I'm Dr. Alexandra Soa. I am a proud alum of Johns Hopkins of the Art School of Arts and Sciences, and I'll get a little bit more into that in a second. So, okay, let's get started. So this is one of my favorite things to talk about. This is the art and science of weight loss, because it is both an art and a science. And I really, as a true, JHU lifer, science is really important to me. So everything that we talk about today is based in evidence, and everything that we'll go through has foundations in research. And this is not just anecdotal. This is what truly works, and everything about weight management. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm a dual board certified doctor of something called internal medicine, and then the field of obesity medicine, also goes by the name of metabolic health medicine. My interest in this field started way back when I was an undergrad. Actually, it predates my time to Hopkins, and it brought me to Johns Hopkins. I was sitting in a lecture when I was about 16 years old, and I heard a professor who was at the time at the University of Maryland talking about global health and preventive health and public health. And I'd never heard these terms before. And I thought, I have to do that. And so actually, when I was on my college hunt, I was actually going through the motions at my Johns Hopkins tour, because my father is a hand surgeon and also went to Johns Hopkins for many, many years. And I was kind of like, okay, well, we'll see, it's dad's school. And then they said, but we have the best school of public health, and you can study it as an undergrad. And at the time, it was the only place to do that. And so Hopkins quickly became my number one. And I pursued public health. But the thing that I'm most fond about my time at Hopkins was that I was able to study all sorts of things. So I actually have a double major in creative writing too. And in the timeline of my education, I started at Hopkins, and that unique combination of creative writing and theater and public health actually led me somewhere very unique right after graduation. I ended up going to the Central School of Speech and Drama in London, and I pursued a degree in theater, in applied theater, and I studied the way in which theater and media could really influence the way that we educate and prevent HIV/AIDS. And this idea came to me when I was a summer intern at the World Health Organization, and it was a tremendous experience. But during that year, I realized I still really wanted to dive deep into the one-on-one connection with individuals. And so I went back to med school. So I went to NYU School of Medicine, which is where I completed my both medical school and then my internal medicine training. And during my internal medicine training, I thought, I got to go back to those public health roots. You know, this is very interesting, but we spend a lot of time in traditional medicine focusing on the end of disease, the how to treat instead of how to prevent. And so most of our education and most of our training was centered around end of disease management rather than beginning and prevention. And that is how I found the field of metabolic health and obesity medicine, because most of my patients were suffering from diseases that evolved from metabolic disturbances. So hypertension, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, stroke. And I thought, well, if we could help people prevent disease when they're earlier in their life and earlier in their disease course, how amazing would that be? But at the time, we really weren't given any education on nutrition or how to actually help people lose weight. I'm sure you've heard, you know, if you want to lose weight, just eat less, exercise more. And I think that's all we were given to help our patients at the time. And I thought there has to be something more. So I actually pursued this extra training after residency, and I spent years kind of traveling around the country, working directly with experts, trying to soak up all their knowledge and going for further certifications, and then eventually my board certification. That led me to open up my own practice that you can see a pretty picture of here. Haven't been in it in a long time because of COVID, but my own practice in New York City that exclusively focuses on metabolic health and weight loss. But even though the practice was a smashing success, I kind of got those little pulls back to that original girl who came to Hopkins who wanted to study public health. And I thought, okay, this is awesome, but I can only help so many people directly in my clinic. How can I affect health on a larger scale? And that's actually how I came to develop the weight biology kit, which we'll talk about at the very end, but you can see a very pretty picture here. And it is the first at-home lab kit that tests for the metabolic factors that go into weight gain and metabolic health, including insulin resistance. And so we're going to talk about that today. Okay, so that was a little bit of a long intro, but I think it's interesting, and I think it all ties back to my favorite college in the world. Okay, so why are we talking about this today? This is a public health epidemic. Excess weight is a big problem in this country, and it is often a problem that's put directly on the individual, but it's really not the case. So right now, 75% of our country suffers from excess weight, whether in the form of overweight or obesity. And so if you're watching this lecture and you're like, oh yeah, I want to learn the secrets to weight loss, but I'm kind of, I feel alone in it. Don't be. Is a big problem and it affects everybody. So if it doesn't affect you directly, then it's affecting a friend, a neighbor, a daughter, a mother, somebody, you know, around you, because statistically, it's just, you're not alone. And the interesting part about this from a public health perspective is that this trend has been dramatically increasing over the last 40 years. So you can see here, so we don't have all the data from 1985, but you'll see the trend. In 1985, no state was predominantly met the criteria for obesity over 15%. And now you'll see all of these states. We have at least about 40% of our population is suffering from obesity right now. So what's going on, and what do we do about it? Because this is just a wild trend, right? Are we just all becoming wildly unhealthy? What's going on? This is very dramatic. So we'll get into that in a second, but why are we caring about this? Is this to be skinny? Is this to fit into our skinny jeans? Is this to get back to our high school weights or college weight? No, none of that. This is about health. We care because excess weight is associated with directly with the development of eventual disease. So all those diseases I was talking about that we were learning how to treat but not prevent, things like type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, stroke, fatty liver disease. We often think about liver disease and cirrhosis as a disease of patients and people who drink too much, alcoholic cirrhosis. But actually, we've had a big shift in this country that cirrhosis is primarily now caused by fat deposits in the liver. Cancers, obesity is directly related to many, many cancers, if not all of them. Coronary artery disease, high cholesterol, joint pains, back pains, even dementia. And one thing that I think often gets overlooked is depression and anxiety linked to excess weight and the weight bias that we associate with it. And then recently, what's really come to attention, it's getting a lot of press and worry among patients, is the link between obesity and COVID morbidity. We do know that COVID-19 is an inflammatory disease. Obesity is an inflammatory disease. So there is a lot of reason to care about this, but this can be quite scary, right? And we're not caring to say you should be afraid, but caring like, okay, let's dig in a little bit about this. And I would venture to guess that most of you who are tuning in today have actually never been asked to think about obesity as a disease and weight as something that has weight loss as something that has a science behind it. And unfortunately, you're not alone. Most doctors actually feel the same way. And I'm only one of about 2,000 doctors in the United States who has specialty training in this field. Okay, so like I said, if any of this is familiar to you, you're not alone, okay? And 50% of Americans are trying to lose weight at any given time, and they spend a ton of money trying to lose weight. And even though, and this is the important thing, even though it only takes 5% of your total body weight, of excess body weight lost to really see big health benefits. So remember, it's not about being skinny, it's just about being healthy. So only 5% of your total body weight is needed to really improve things. Even though all these people are trying and you only need to lose a little bit of weight, 95% of people will fail to achieve any loss. So that's a big problem because we have a big public health problem, and yet we have people trying to do something about it but aren't getting to the end outcome that we desire. So what do we do about it? Okay, quick point. The reason that obesity and weight loss, why obesity is easy, excess weight is easy to attain, and why weight loss is often so hard is because obesity is a disease. I embrace the word obesity, and I want you all to think of it as a disease. We often think of excess weight as a lack of willpower or a failure of the self to do something about it. And as anyone who's ever tried to lose weight, that's just not true. If we could all will our weight away, we would. Why is it so hard? Because obesity is a disease. The World Health Organization classifies it as a disease. And the more we talk about it as a disease, the more insurance companies will cover medications that we'll get to. We will really start to embrace this as not a fault of the individual. It is complex. It's probably one of the most complex and misunderstood diseases out there. So we have genetics coming into play. We have the environment. We have immune systems. We have endocrine systems. We have medical issues that are separate from obesity that you might be being treated for or suffering from that can also contribute to weight gain. And then we have neurobehavioral elements that are learned through families, television shows, magazines that are all filtering in. And then I'd venture to say that there are even 10 more factors piled on here, but it's a super complex disease. And so if it's a complex disease, we should take a complex approach to it. One of the things I want to dig into right now is the hormonal pathway of things. So we talked about genetics. Now, genetics is incredibly important to risk factors for obesity. If your parents both have a BMI greater than 30 before pregnancy, your rates of suffering from obesity as an adult are upwards of 80%. So we know that there are a lot of strong links. We are generally not equipped yet to start screening people for all of the genes that factor into obesity, but we are starting to get there. And more we're realizing that often we're going to be able to start medicating or managing specific genes in a specific way. Genetically, we have not evolved dramatically genetically over the past 40 years when we see that big trend in obesity that's kind of taking over the country, right? We're not that evolved as humans that we can like quickly change our genes. But one thing that is changing is hormones. So the exciting thing is that we know a lot more about the hormonal pathway of weight loss and weight gain than we did 10 years ago, 20, definitely 30 years ago. And this, I promise, this picture on the left is the most Hopkinsy thing that I will have in this presentation today. But I want to show you, this is literally just a snapshot. There are 400 hormonal pathways that we know of that are involved in weight regulation. This is a very filtered down version of it. And there are a few things I want to draw your attention to. I wish I had a little clicker. I don't think you can see my clicker, but we have here, adipocytes are fat. So fat is an organ, and it's probably the most powerful organ once you start to develop too much of it. And it signals all sorts of pathways. And we have here the stomach. The stomach is a regulator of hormones and hormonal pathway signaling. Same for the liver, also the small intestine and the pancreas. And the big hormones that come into play here that are definitely the way that we interplay them in our bodies is definitely changing, and one of the reasons that we've seen such increasing rates of obesity. We have leptin, we have insulin, and ghrelin. Ghrelin is a hunger hormone. Leptin is a satiety hormone, and insulin is somewhere in the middle. And we're going to talk about that in a second. When we lose weight, actually, if you've ever heard of The Biggest Loser, that show was quite popular a couple of years ago. There was a great study that came out that showed actually regain of weight of all the contestants that were lost. And what they showed was after dramatic weight loss, that might I add was not done in the most sustainable and healthy fashion, the contestants had an upregulation of ghrelin, the hunger hormone, and a downregulation of leptin, the satiety hormone. Their bodies had figured out that they lost a lot of weight, and it was a big red flag to them that this had happened. And so the body fixed, quote unquote, fixed the hormones. And this is something we do struggle with in the yo-yoing of weight loss, and why it's preferable to do things in small increments and to prevent significantly excess weight before it comes on. But does that mean all hope is lost when we lose weight? No. And we're going to talk about how to do it correctly. The one hormone I really want to talk about that has probably had the biggest influence on the obesity epidemic in our country over the past 40 years is insulin. Insulin is a hormone that's produced through the pancreas. In type 1 diabetes, a patient does not produce levels of insulin because the beta cells in the pancreas do not work properly. Type 2 diabetes is when the pancreas makes insulin, and for a long time it actually makes too much insulin, and the body becomes insulin resistant. And then eventually, for some with type 2 diabetes, the pancreas just gets really tired and burned out, and eventually it may stop making insulin. What is the purpose of insulin? Insulin is a glucose wrangler. Your body, your pancreas, secretes insulin every time you take in food, but not just any food, carbohydrate food, and specifically refined carbohydrates and highly processed foods. And this is probably the biggest factor that's come across our nation, which is the prevalence and the availability of highly processed carbohydrates and fake sugars and processed foods. Because every time your body sees these things, it's producing insulin, and it might over time start producing insulin at higher and higher levels to deal with the sugar that's coming in. But even though we're producing higher levels, the body says, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know how to take up the glucose, and the muscles don't know how to take it up, your organs don't know how to take it up. And so instead of taking it up, it shuttles everything over to fat. And your pancreas says, well, there's still blood sugar around, so I better produce more insulin. But this insulin that keeps going up and up and up is not really effective insulin. But parts of your body, specifically the fat storing parts and the hunger parts, don't really care about that. So we develop insulin resistance Is insulin resistance leads to weight gain, and weight gain can lead to insulin resistance. And this is the key to really understanding early risk factors for eventually developing obesity and the complicated diseases that are associated with insulin resistance. This is a very boiled down version of this, but I promise if you do a little bit of reading and just even type in insulin resistance and come over to my website and read more about it, it's a fascinating relationship to how your body is taking in food and whether it decides to burn it right away or to store it as fats. And that's why for some people, it becomes really hard to lose weight once they've tipped over into an insulin resistance category. And you might say, okay, well, you've told us that 75% of the country has excess weight and is overweight. Well, what about patients with insulin resistance? Well, pre-diabetes is a precursor to type 2 diabetes. And I would venture to say pre-diabetes, if you catch it at pre-diabetes, it can often be too late because the insulin resistance is developing for 15 to 20 years before we even get to that place. And 1 out of 3 Americans have pre-diabetes. And so if 1 out of 3 Americans have pre-diabetes, you can imagine that the threshold for insulin resistance in this country is quite large too. So this is probably the nerdiest slide. If you have questions, I'm happy to get to it at the end of the lecture, but let's get to actually what works in weight loss. Okay, so I told you how complex it is. I just went through a complicated slide about hormones. So the big takeaway point, if you learn nothing else from this, is that if we've got a complicated disease like obesity and it's multifactorial and all these things are at play, shouldn't we have a multifactorial treatment plan? Shouldn't it be more robust than just download a fitness tracker or buy a magazine or try harder, right? It should be comprehensive. And so my mission in life is to educate that actually obesity, weight loss, weight gain, and metabolic health is complex. It doesn't have to be confusing. They're complicated, but we do need to come at it from many angles. So we've got an education component, which is what we're doing today. We have medicines, we have nutrition, and then things that get ignored are accountability and cognitive behavioral therapy. And we're going to touch on all of those in the next 15 minutes. Okay, weight loss medications. So weight loss medications are a big breakthrough in the field of weight loss medicine that is continuously evolving. Weight loss medications, there are 5 FDA approved meds. A 6th one has just cleared stage 3 trials that got a big write-up in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago. And I want to tell you whether you should talk to your doctor about them. So who is right for a weight loss medication? If you meet the criteria of a body mass index or a BMI over 30, you meet the criteria for them. But just because you've gotten to the point of obesity and a BMI doesn't mean that we should wait to get there. So for many people at a lower threshold with a comorbidity, meaning you have another disease that we read off on that list, like you have some insulin resistance or have some joint pain, back pain, you might be a candidate for these medications. Now, am I saying just take a medication and do nothing else? Not at all. Remember, you need a multifaceted treatment team and a plan and approach to really be effective at this. So this is in addition to nutrition, to physical activity and behavioral therapies. This will not work alone in a bubble. It might work a little bit, but it'll work a heck of a lot better if you take all the approaches. And the one point as we go through these medications, I do want you to know that this is not just a behavioral modification when we talk about medications, it alters physiology. These medications loop back to that screen 2 screens ago where it showed all the hormones and the interplay between the stomach and the pancreas and the gut. These medications affect hormonal pathways that influence the greater body and not just shut off your appetite. And that's what makes these different from weight loss medications of the past too. Okay, so here is a quick rundown of these medications. You'll often find, if you talk to your doctor about potential weight loss medications, they actually won't know what you're talking about and they'll be scared. So I love doctors. I love the field of medicine, but we're sometimes a little slow to adapt. I think I read that it takes about 17 years for new research to become the mainstay in clinical medicine. So it's not your doctor's fault if they don't know about this. We didn't learn this in medical school, and we have to advocate. I have to really advocate for the schools that I'm affiliated with to give a lecture on these things. It's a lot of doctors aren't comfortable with them, but they should be. If your doctor is not open to it, and this is something you want to explore, you can head over, and we should put this in the comments because I didn't put this in the lecture, but you can head over to www.abom.org, and you can find a board certified doctor like me who specializes in this field and who'd be happy and open to talking about the use of these medications. So the top medication is called Qsymia, and it does combine a stimulant and then a medication that's traditionally been used to help migraine. And it acts on certain parts of the brain that cut down on appetite control. And it's a very effective, safe, long-term solution. Again, all of these are for long-term. These aren't quick fixes. We have to approach these medications like we were going to treat high blood pressure. When we are diagnosed with high blood pressure, we want to change all of the things in our life. And if we're offered a medication, we need a medication, we'll take it, but you don't stop the medication as soon as your blood pressure gets under control, you continue it. Same thing with these weight loss medications, which is sometimes a hard concept to wrap your head around. The next medication that's getting a lot of attention is called Saxenda. It's a GLP-1 agonist. It acts like a hormone, one of the important hormones in the pathway. This type of drug just got approved in a second iteration called Sema, which is the short name for it, that had the big piece in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago. So that will be our sixth option. Contrave is a fascinating medication that actually works on pleasure centers in the brain. So it's an excellent choice for patients who overeat due to emotion and have a tied behavioral component to going after certain types of foods and have a lot of cravings. I often say C for cravings. Now, Trexone, one of the parts of the drug, was actually originally developed to help people cut back on alcohol. And bupropion is actually a medication that we use for smoking cessation. So it's very fascinating how all of these sort of addictive behaviors can be tied to one area of the brain that we can target with medications. Orlistat is a medication that you've heard of, gets a lot of bad press. It's called Ally. You can get it actually at the drugstore. It has a lot of side effects. And so I don't actually use it in clinical practice because we have much more effective agents, but you might have a lot of more effective agents with a lot less side effects, but you might have heard of it. Finally, there's a new drug, but it's not really a drug. It's actually FDA approved as a device called Plenity, and it's a pill you swallow, and the pill expands in your stomach ahead of meals, and it really cuts back on hunger because the little gel-like substance that expands, it actually hits the side of the stomach and influences those hormonal pathways of leptin and ghrelin, and it will say, I'm full, you can stop eating now. And so it's been quite effective. The interesting thing about Plenity is this does not follow the rules of BMI that I talked to you about a couple slides ago. This is actually approved for anyone who is just in the overweight category, so a BMI of 25 or greater. Okay, so pop quiz. Does anyone know what the most effective way of eating is for weight loss? Okay, I'll tell you. The one you can stick with. So I know that can be disappointing to many of you. Potentially you're saying, but I came here because I wanted you to tell me exactly how to eat. And the fact of the matter is, time and again, science shows that the most effective diet is the one that you can stick with. We are such unique individuals to think that one way of eating, one shake, one recommended diet plan would work for all of us is just, it's unreasonable. We have different palates, we have different schedules, we have different family needs, we have different budgets. So really, it's just about consistency. I will say that with the predominance of insulin resistance being behind a lot of weight gain, and so if you have markers of insulin resistance, of pre-diabetes, of type 2 diabetes, it is very smart to pick a diet in which you are carbohydrate aware. So one of these top, I'd say like 4 diets are the low carbohydrate diet and a ketogenic diet, and even on the paleo Mediterranean whole foods way of eating. We want to make sure that we are limiting our refined foods And that goes for anybody. So I'll say, well, there's no one specific perfect way to lose weight. Starting with shopping on the periphery of the grocery store, avoiding all the stuff that's packaged and processed and pulverized will be your friend in the weight loss process. There are two types of diets that have gotten a lot of attention and I think deserve some real validation in the scientific community. One of them is nutritional ketosis. It's a diet that's been around for a very, very long time. And this is where instead of using carbohydrates for fuel, you actually really just use fat for fuel. And that is a way of eating that's focused on protein and fats, primarily with a small amount of carbohydrates coming in through the form of vegetables predominantly. This is a strict way of eating, but it can be very liberating for many people who just feel like they're never satisfied. They have either type 2 diabetes or are insulin resistant. The weight keeps coming on. They're dieting. They're not eating many calories. It can be incredibly liberating because they can eat until they're full. They can be part of society. They don't need to do shakes or weird meal replacements. And you achieve this by eating only about 20 grams of carbohydrates a day. There are three main macronutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And this eliminates mostly carbohydrates. And it can be very, very effective for reversing insulin resistance and the weight gain associated with it and helping to kind of reestablish metabolic health. The other option is intermittent fasting. This has gotten a lot of press. It can be an effective way for both weight loss, but I'll say even more effectively weight maintenance. Weight loss is often the easier part of weight loss, but maintenance is the harder part, and that's why we yo-yo. And intermittent fasting can be a very effective tool when you get to where you want to be, and you will either do some timed fasting, whether it's 12 hours, or you go through breakfast, or you skip dinner one day a week, or even do a 24-hour fast or longer. This affects hormones. It will decrease insulin, right? Which is we're always like wanting to bring that insulin level down, and it will maintain your basal metabolic rate, even with decreased calories when you cycle this. So they're both very good tools. The other things that I would like you to go back to if you are thinking about starting a weight loss plan is food journaling and meal planning. These are the basics. We've got fancy apps, we've got fancy tools, but I will tell you, whatever way you can do this consistently is the way you should do it. So if that's a journal, you just write down what you eat and when and why, and we'll get to the why in a second. And meal planning. If I could tell you that you could make food choice for the whole week one time as opposed to 21 times, wouldn't you pick the option where you think about it once instead of 21 times? If you have to do this 21 times throughout the week, you're going to get decision fatigue. And I'm telling you that about 2 days into the week, you'll start to throw all your healthy eating out the window because it's too hard. Jobs, kids, COVID, work from home. You will make the easy, fast decision and the hyper palatable decision and not the healthy one that you set out to do on Sunday. So not meal prepping, but meal planning. Now, when you log your food in your journal, and I encourage everyone to do this for about a week just to see what they're doing and how they're feeling, I want you to note the circumstances and also how hungry were you? We often eat out of boredom, out of routine, and we're not really clued into our hunger. This often starts as young as babies, right? When you think about it, your mom said, gosh, I even do this, and this is my specialty, but with my kids, they'll say, well, finish your vegetables, finish your plate, finish this, do that. But they'll say, I'm not hungry. And you'll say, well, do it anyway, because I anticipate that you'll be hungry in an hour. We need to encourage everybody to pay attention to their hunger cues. I really only want you to start eating when you're pretty hungry. Like you even get the hunger growl. You're thinking about food. Like your brain is alerting you. And then I want you to take some time when you're eating, right? Try to like take a minute and not just shove it in your face, which is hard to do. But I want you to try to stop as soon as you feel neutral, like not full. We do not want you getting to full because it takes your body a little bit of extra time to catch up and for those hunger hormones to shut off and say, okay, leptin, I'm satiated. You can stop eating now. This is a super useful, intuitive way of eating. And then the final thing is we often have a lot of preconceived notions about food, our weight, our bodies, and our ability to lose weight. So cognitive behavioral therapy for patients who really take on a lot of emotions around food and the weight loss journey can be incredibly, incredibly effective. So often people will adopt the diet starts tomorrow, right? Mentality, like, oh, I meant to start it today, but it'll start tomorrow. So I'll just eat everything under the sun, right? So you kind of break it down and you'll say, well, the circumstance is I didn't eat something healthy for breakfast. And your thought about that is, well, since I didn't eat something healthy for breakfast, like why eat something healthy for lunch or dinner? I'll just put it off until tomorrow. But often what happens is in that process, the emotion becomes very stressful. And we take on a lot of blame and emotional burden when we think like that about food and we think that way about dieting. And when you start to feel shame, what do when you're someone who turns to food to eat? You eat again. You take more actions that you don't want. And so what I want you to do, if this resonates with you, is in that journal when you're writing down foods, are you hungry? How do you feel? Tell me if there are any negative thoughts associated with that, because you can go back in and you can change it and you can recognize the patterns of behavior. It's an incredibly useful tool that I encourage everyone to think about and embrace on their weight loss journey. Okay, so we're coming to the end. I think I've done pretty well on time. I did want to tell you guys, and I want to give you some additional resources. So out of all of this, you see weight loss is complex, and I do advocate for working with trained professionals that are close to you, doctors, nutritionists, physical therapists, trainers. But I developed something with that little public health bug that was planted in my brain at Hopkins that allows people to start this process at home in the comfort of their own homes and makes this understanding of insulin resistance a lot more acceptable and accessible. So it's called the Weight Biology Kit. It's an at-home finger prick test that tests for 8 biomarkers that go into the complexity of metabolic health. And among them, and the thing that I'm most excited about, is that we're testing for insulin and we're combining it with glucose, and we are giving you an insulin resistance score that's based off of a well-studied mathematical model, and it predicts early insulin resistance. And so if you find that, oh gosh, I'm having a hard time losing weight, what's going on? You might be able to diagnose yourself with insulin resistance. And by no means do I want people to start becoming their own doctor, but it's a place to start empowering and educating and putting together 2 of those many components of what it takes to lose weight effectively. And you can check it out on my website at getsowell.com. There, we have a lot of resources of things that we talked about today, and you can download. So we've got a hunger scale and a food log, and built right in for you, a doctor discussion guide you can have with your own doctor, and a guide, a very deep dive into the FDA approved medications. So a deeper dive in the things we talked about. And there are even more things we didn't even get to today. And you could poke around on the website, things like activity and lifestyle assessment or a mindset assessment. So would cognitive behavioral therapy be effective for you? You can go over, poke around, and take some assessment tools. So I've enjoyed this so much. Please feel free to reach out. My email is here. You can find me on Instagram on my personal account at Alexandra Soa MD, or on the company, the Weight Biology Kit account at Get So Well. And I think that is it. Yes.
Well, wonderful
Stop
job.
sharing now.
Yeah, this was
I'll leave that up.
amazing. I am so fascinated by all of this, and judging by the amount of amazing questions we have in the Q&A, let's dive right in. Excuse the noise in the background. I have a dog who's very interested in a bone right now and making a lot of noise. So let's dive in to our first question. So can you not be obese and still have unseen visceral fat around organs that will still create health problems similar to obesity?
Yes, and probably we do see it even for most patients as we get older in age, and even with a lower BMI, because BMI is an exact science. It's height and weight, but it doesn't take into effect muscle. And so yes, probably. I will tell you, the thing I didn't talk about today, and I probably should have, is something called metabolic syndrome. So metabolic syndrome is a very fascinating constellation of 5 things that go into determining whether you're at risk for other diseases down the road. And one of them is actually waist circumference. I have a guide to this on the website, so you can go download it. You can actually download a paper tape on my website to see what your waist circumference is, because often people will have an elevated weight circumference, which is not correlated with good health, but their BMI will be normal. And so it's not just the number on the scale that we need to look at when we're talking about this. Again, this is a complex disease. It's kind of sneaky, like it will come up, to you. And so we need to think about it from every angle.
Well, thank you. I think it's amazing that you have a tape measure that we can download. That's amazing. So I like to say that some of us have gained the COVID-19, but for those who have gained a few pounds since the pandemic, despite intermittent fasting and daily exercise, what are your thoughts on that? It seems like as soon as a pound is lost, maybe it's regained the next day. And what are some foods for the health of your gut biome?
Oh gosh. Okay. That's like a whole other 3 lecture series. So gut microbiome is one of the reasons likely that we are kind of seeing this trend in obesity in the country. Didn't talk about this either. There's so much to talk about this, but our exposure to plastics and antibiotics in our food and antibiotics that we take and overprescribed as doctors, we are ruining our gut microbiome. And with every generation, we're passing down a worse and worse gut microbiome, because your gut microbiome starts in your mother. And it's influenced by those who live around you. So it's really cool. We don't quite know how to harness it yet, but it's so cool. And in our lifetimes, we will. So you want to do things that are high in fiber. You want to have fermented foods and a lot of water and decreased additives, sugar additives like aspartame. So things that are in the diet drinks, that's the stuff we want to stay away from for a healthy gut microbiome. Probiotics can occasionally help you for short term. We don't have probiotics that are effective enough to really influence the strains of gut microbacteria yet, but soon. And then, COVID-19. So 5 pounds. So I don't want people who have normal health and abnormal health to fret fanatically over 5 pounds. So Jamie, you can appreciate this, but as you get older, you look back on pictures and you're like, oh, I thought I was so heavy then. And you look back and like, I was like 10 pounds thinner and wow, I was so beautiful. And it's a terrible place to be when you're always fighting against yourself with a few pounds weight gain, and then you're kind of beating yourself up. You can actually kind of hurt your metabolism, and you can hurt your future body and your future healthy weight and metabolism by overly focusing on 5 pounds. Now, that said, 5 pounds every year quickly leads to 20 pounds, right? And so it's keeping an eye on it. I would say, even if you're healthy, if you're exercising and you're eating well and you're intermittent fasting, I would say look at the meals themselves. So we are all less active than we were a year ago at this time. We're walking a lot less. So that's something that we've all stopped doing. Just even we're sitting at our computers and we're just decreasing the amount of fidgeting and simple steps. So you used to drive into campus, you would walk 1,000 feet to your office, you would walk 1,000 feet back. We're not doing that anymore. So even with strength training, which is usually what I ask people to focus on, I'd say keep up your cardio too, just simple walking and small movements, and really asking yourself if you're eating to hunger or overeating or snacking. That's a tough thing of this year. And hopefully it goes back to normal soon.
Yes, hopefully. So, you mentioned earlier hormones, and, that's a big thing I know personally. And have you looked at the effect of genetic manipulations of our food supply? In other words, maybe wheat.
Yeah.
And is there a connection there?
There is. So the safest way to eat is the most unprocessed way of eating. We manipulate things, and we manipulate food, and then we put it into boxes and packages that are manipulated in plastics and even papers that are not really healthy. And that those chemicals can seep in micro doses into the already processed food. And there are hormone disruptors at every step of this, and they do influence hormonal pathways, and they influence our gut microbiome. And they make it so that, you know, you'll anecdotally hear people say that they'll go to Italy on vacation and they'll eat all the pasta and they won't gain weight, but if they have a couple pieces of pasta here, they will. There is something to be said that your body has to work harder to digest food that is not totally pulverized, totally processed, totally broken down already. And there is a more equal equation of energy in, energy out. So we do have to be very careful. And I would even venture to say, this is bold, this is being recorded, but I would venture to say we have to be careful about processed kind of new types of food, meats, things that look like other foods, and understanding kind of how they influence us, because they are processed. And that's the things that I would love people to stay away from.
Are we talking about the plant-based processed? Perhaps we're talking about some of our plant-based proteins, maybe other, not bugs, but I don't think the bug proteins are overly processed.
I think whenever we come up with a food that's, it's like, whatever we're talking about. So yeah, so the plant-based proteins, we're trying to make something into something else. What are the processes that we do to get there? We want to trust everything we're consuming. It's exhausting to like vet everything. You just have to make sure. And I think it's always a little bit curious. We have to make sure that when you try to take one thing or a flavor and package it into something else, something is lost. It's like a Dorito chip. Like, why do I want the Dorito chip to taste like a pizza? Like, well, what is going on here? You know, there's so many chemicals to get to that place that I think, you know, we are a society that has kind of been a little bit bamboozled by the food industry, and we are fed from a very early age processed, hyper palatable, and very addictive foods. And so if it's hard for you to say no to some foods, it was made to be like that. So I don't know if you've ever tried to quit something that you're quote unquote addicted to. You probably are, and it was made to be that way.
That's scary, actually, but understandable. So here's a good question, getting back to the science of things. So one of our guests has seen that the particle size of flour, he's seen articles that the particle size of flour is too small and causes a variety of problems. So what do you think of stone ground and other flours with larger particle sizes?
It's a more natural iteration. And so it's your body has to take that particle and break it down. It's not already been broken down for you. So grain is not the problem for most people. Wheat is not the problem for most people. It's the way that these things have been literally pulverized to smithereens and then placed back together for mass distribution. So I'm totally in agreement with that statement.
Yeah. That makes sense. So I'm sorry that we're sort of all over the place, but we have some amazing questions. So I have another question about weight set point.
Yes.
How do you change that if you can?
So the weight set point theory is a theory, and I will tell you, in years of doing one-on-one weight management with patients, you can definitely break beyond it. What your body does and why it's best to kind of tackle weight loss with a plan that's going to work rather than doing this yo-yoing cycling over and over again is that your body does like it's comfortable at a higher weight. And that's, we evolved like this, like an animal that was able to have fat stores survived a famine. And then if you lose a lot of weight, you're signaling this body that's, you know, in the forest that, oh gosh, something terrible must have happened. Let me change the hormones so you can regain that weight so you can get back to that place. And that's the theory of a set point weight maintenance. It can hold true for some people, but if the weight loss is done correctly, you can definitely break beyond it and create a new lower set point. One takeaway message that I briefly touched on at the beginning, and I'm going to go back and alter my slides right now when I do this in the future, but weight loss doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be 5% of your total body weight to achieve big health benefits. And if you want to even achieve even bigger, longer lasting benefits, 10%. And so for someone who's 200 pounds, 10% weight loss is only 20 pounds. 5% is just 10. And so often we have very, very, very big goals with weight loss that work against us. And so if we actually take weight loss in 5% increments with our goal being 10%, if you get beyond it, great, but goal being 10%, we will break through that plateau and you will not see these huge hormonal imbalances that you might otherwise see. So food for thought.
Unintended. That's really interesting. That makes me feel better about my personal goals. So I know a lot of these addictive sodas and foods and stuff have artificial sweeteners, which are probably terrible for us. Is there a correlation between artificial sweeteners and insulin resistance?
Yes, I saw someone ask that question. It was a smart question. So the answer is not for everybody, but for many people it does. Some people see the sugar. It makes so much sense when you think about it. Some people's bodies see the sweet taste and they still release insulin, even though they didn't technically see a carbohydrate. And so if you're consuming a lot of diet sugar over time, it both increases hunger cues because your body did release insulin, or it got its palate kind of like started and it wants more and more and more. And for others, we actually do see an insulin surge. And so if you're doing that without eating and you're not even thinking about it, and you're being told that it's diet and has no calories, often this will develop without you kind of having any awareness of it. So yes, there can be a correlation.
So always water is probably your best option.
Yeah, seltzer. I love a lot of like hint water. Flavored things. Tea. I'm a big fan of tea. I think we underutilize tea. Also coffee. There are a lot of things we can drink that aren't off limits. But I would say, as you can find me on record saying this, I am a Diet Pepsi addict. It started in residency when you didn't have access to coffee, and I tried my hardest to really keep it under control and go periods of time without it. But that's one of those foods that they engineered for me, and my brain was like, I want more. So, you don't have to say never have it, but just be very careful with it.
Yeah, Diet Dr. Pepper's done that for me. Like I can't not have it sometimes.
Yes.
So when you sometimes when you feel hungry, are you really just thirsty? And how can you know the difference?
Well, so I would say stay hydrated. So the average adult needs about 64 ounces of water a day. More if you're actually cutting out carbohydrates, because carbohydrates carry and keep a lot of water with them. And so that is actually the first place. So if you're getting that hydration goal, then you can say, okay, well, what my body's telling me is probably hunger. Often the fatigue we feel, the headaches, the crumminess, the hangry feeling is often water depletion. And beyond water, it's electrolyte depletion. So Gatorade, we often think about as like the drink for athletes. What's the magic ingredient in Gatorade? It's salt. So often if you're feeling and craving hunger, but you shouldn't be hungry, it might actually be a little bit of an electrolyte depletion. I actually advocate for people to put a little pinch of salt occasionally into water or seltzer. It masks the taste, and it's like a sugar-free version of Gatorade and very affordable. So
that's a great idea. I know my 8th grader gets really hangry, so I'm just gonna give him some water, make him with a little
Pellegrino,
salt.
it already has a little bit of salt in it. So
no, that's great advice. So I know many of us every day hopefully are getting older. Something I strive to do is get older. Do we gain weight as we get older? Is there like a proclivity for that?
We do. We do for a few reasons, and it doesn't necessarily need to be the worst thing in the world. There is a protective benefit to a little bit of weight gain. Actually, as we age, it can be strong for muscle. It can be protective of our bones. And there is actually, what we call an obesity paradox, where you can be a little bit healthier in some situations with a little bit of extra weight. The problem is we've kind of blown the walls off of that protective thing that developed. And we're already starting at heavier weights, kind of entering into, our later years, and living for a lot longer, right? And we just evolutionarily, we haven't kept up with this. Our basal metabolic, I'm going to try that again. Our basal metabolic rate, our BMR, decreases every single day as we age. And that's the largest factor that goes into play. And we lose muscle mass. Muscle is very metabolically active. And so as we age, we do need less and less calories. And if you think of someone who lived late into their 80s or 90s, they often ate very little, right? And you'll say, well, you eat like a bird, it's actually their needs now, their calorie needs now, and they paid attention to it. And so it's important. Strength training is also crucial as we age to keep up the muscle mass. And so we don't lose the proportion fat to muscle, and we kind of keep that intact.
So I want to shift a little bit and talk about your weight biology kit. So I had a question here. Is it something that you would recommend pregnant women use?
So that's an interesting question. I think that pre-pregnancy, yes, we're not actively recommending it to pregnant patients. They should be working closely with their doctor. And things can be a little bit wonky and in pregnancy where you have different ranges for things. I did see a question here asking whether the kit was a DNA kit. It is not actually. We're looking at 8 lab biomarkers, 2 of which are hormones. Others we're testing for cholesterol, thyroid stimulating hormone, insulin, glucose, vitamin B12, and we're putting them together in a very unique way. And so while they might look like labs that you've seen or heard of before, we're actually putting them together so that we can help you make these diagnoses of early insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, kind of doing an at-home walkthrough of what you might do with a specialist, and really so that you can kind of get information so you feel more empowered. So you don't just rush through your physical once a year and they say, lose weight, see you in 12 months. So we're like, wait, hold up. I was able to learn something about my body, and actually I meet the criteria for metabolic syndrome. So what can we do about that? And you'll go in with your checklist and your medication guide, and you'll say, oh, maybe these are things I want to try. Or you'll take them to your nutritionist and say, look, I found early insulin resistance. So what can we do? And they're going to be so excited because all of these nutritionists and trainers, they have good understanding of these things, but can't order the labs themselves. So it's really a foundational element tool. We're not diving into genetics because, to be honest, even if we were able to kind of test for obesity genes, we're not at that stage yet where we're targeting treatment to it. So it would be useful and maybe interesting, but it wouldn't be that empowering. And my whole goal is to like actively provide ways to change and empower and educate patients.
So in this, virtual age, are people able to get in touch with you and meet with you and all that, even though we can't meet you in person?
Yeah, I think I'm going through my slides here. Yeah, yes. I do have a private practice that serves New York City area, and we're completely virtual. So you can work directly with me through that practice. And this kit is available in 47 states. And with the kit, we're providing a lot of resources, including webinars. You can dive deep into your personal questions and get kind of access to me for a much more affordable price point. I did see someone ask again for the website that I recommend. There are other doctors out there like me, www.abom.org. Like I said, my goal is just to get everyone the treatment and the care that they need. So I'll spread the specialty love.
So I think I put that in right. www.abom.com. I put that in the chat for everyone.
.org.
Oh,
I don't know
.org.
where .com will take you. It's an organization.
Sorry, everybody. I was.
No.
All right. And I can put that in the follow-up email. So I think we have time for maybe one more question. And
yeah.
Well, this is a good one. What do you do when you hit the diet plateau? What can you do to push
so
past
many
it?
things. So you have to keep going. So the first thing you do is you do not throw in the towel. Okay. So it's so funny. Patients in my practice will lose 60, 70, 80 pounds. And we'll get on the phone one week and they'll be like, I'm so frustrated. And you look back at the last month and because I'm objective, I'll say, you just lost 6 pounds in the last month. And they'll say, but I didn't lose anything this week. That's a plateau. No. Your body, right, sometimes needs to take some time to figure out what just happened over the past month or the past 40 pounds. And so you're allowed to stay at a weight. You're allowed to gain a little bit of weight. Your body does not understand like your mind and what you want it to do. And we are fluid beings, literally and figuratively. We're made up of a lot of water, and we're allowed to have hormonal changes, food changes, salts, electrolyte. We're allowed to kind of swing. So if your scale goes up one day, this is what throws everybody off. They'll be like, that's it. I'm working so hard. And if they would just wait 2 more days, you'd be down 3 pounds. And it's hard to get that perspective when you're living it. Even me, who does this for a living, I fully understand this reaction because it's hard to sometimes see. So that's why food logging and writing down your weight, if it does not become obsessive, if it becomes if it's a healthy relationship, is very, very useful, because then you can be like, okay, what did Dr. So said? She said, go back and look at a month ago. Oh yeah, I'm down 3 pounds. That's awesome. You forget. We don't remember as humans. We only remember yesterday and then like half of today. So.
I hear you. Well, we're out of time. And what I would like to tell everybody on this call is be kind to yourself, give yourself grace, especially if you're in a weight loss journey. The goal is to be healthy, and whatever that means for
Healthy, not
you.
skinny.
We are, yes, exactly. We wish you all the luck and the best. And I will send you all of these resources. My dog wants some attention right now, so I'm petting one of them. So sorry, you guys get it. You work from home too, right? So thank you, Dr. Soa. This has been really educational and informative. Thank you so much for your time and your talent. And I will share a follow-up email with everybody that will include a recording of the program along with a list of resources and our event schedule. I really hope that you will join us at a future webinar. This has been amazing. Thank you so much. Everyone be safe, be happy, be healthy. That's our time.
Bye. Thank you.